Today's video is about this, printing a very complex organic model using supports but still have the confidence that you are able to remove it like this. And for that we are going to ask the questions that we get the most. When should I use the supports? What type of support should I use? How many types of supports exist and which one is the best of them? How do you set it in the slicer to have the best result both on aesthetics and resistance? And one just as important as all the others, how to safely remove my supports. And regardless if you're a beginner or a pro, my objective is that by the end of this video, your supports are going to be easy and simple to remove. Let's go. I have brought here three classical examples. The first one is what we call here at STLFLIX islands. That's when we have small parts of our model that begin to be printed mid-air. This is why we have those little floating islands. And that happens quite a bit in this mask. If you look at these teeth, they begin to print mid-air until they eventually join the rest of the mask. And this is what we call islands, because the first layer that is going to pop up in here is a little island that it needs to be very well supported. And these regions, they have to be printed with supports mandatorily, because otherwise they are not going to be printed. So these types of files, they are very critical and very tricky to print. They would be much better printed in resin. But now that we have good techniques with using supports, we can achieve really good results using supports even in these types of models. And the second case where you will have to use supports are the types of models where your printer will have to have a big part that is going to be printed on a bridge. I'm going to slice it down to show you what happens with this model. So when we look at this sliced model, the G-code, when you push down the layers, you will see that the first layer that it deposits right after we have this big open gap is a blue layer, which is a bridge. So we have a big area here that is printed on a bridge, and this is a critical factor that might need in some cases for you to use support. In this case, it's very good to use support. And it is a bridge because we have one structure on one side. So when we push it down like that, we can see. So it crosses from one side to the other, making an actual bridge, all right? And then if we move this longer a little bit, you'll see that it's already changed to the bridge color. So it's not an overhang wall anymore. It is an actual bridge. And just to be clear, in some cases, bridges do not demand for you to use support. But when they are too long, like in this case, then it's interesting for you to use the supports in order to achieve a better result with your prints. And then the third case that I brought here is when we have sort of like an incomplete bridge. So we have something on one side, but the other side has nothing to anchor with. So it's not a bridge because you are not crossing a path, you're not crossing a gap. You have one side, the other one is loose, and being a hot filament that you are melting into the space, it's gonna get loose and it's gonna fall. All right, so let me show here what I'm exactly talking about. This is what I'm talking about. We have the filament being deposited on one side, and then it goes and it does not cross a gap. It goes and it comes back. So this, if not well supported, is going to give you a mistake. It's going to give you a flawed print because you're not anchoring it on any other position on the other side. So starting with the most critical print that we have in here, if I push this down, you will see exactly why we call it the islands. You see, this is not connected at all with the rest of my model. As you can see, this is something that needs to be very well supported because it's going to keep on printing ideally until the point where we finally connect the model with the rest, that little loose object with the rest of our model. This is why it's an island, and this is why it's such a critical and tricky print to execute. Okay, so how do I usually tackle slicing these types of file? Usually I go with the support painting, which is, I'm using Orca Slicer here, but it's available on Bamboo, it's available on Creality Cloud, it's available on pretty much every slicer. And the first thing that you gotta do in here is to highlight the overhangs. Modern day printers, they print up to 30 degrees in overhang, so it would be roughly around here. But since I like to be extra safe, we can do 35 degrees here. And what you are going to do is pretty much the same that we do when we do multicolor painting, which is to paint the regions where you want the supports to be in. I'm going to deactivate my cursor here because it's going to be easier for me to position. And on the same way, you can also, like I did by accident here, but if you right click, if you click with the right mouse button, you can put an area where you don't want supports to be at all, which we're not going to be using because we are only applying supports to the painted regions. All right, so this is the way I like to do it. It's still a little bit of a manual work, but it's still something that it doesn't take too much time, and you don't have to be extra careful. It's not like painting a multicolor model that it's going to show up pretty much, because what you will have in here is a much more it's not something that is going to impact too much on the overall static of your model, so you can do it as you want. You don't need to be super duper careful with it. If you paint it a little bit more, it's not gonna be a huge issue, especially because well calibrated supports are going to be easy to remove, as you saw in the beginning of this video. All right, so let's try and paint some of these areas. So you can kind of identify the more critic regions by kind of moving your cursor here on the highlight overhang. All right, let me go back to 35. I saw that these ones are very critical, so I'm gonna apply a little bit also in these little guys, again in here, again in here. So we have a few more islands here on the back that we need to take care. So take your time, be patient, try to look at with a very critic eye. Don't try to get rid of the task. Do it with conscious and go slow, because especially because whenever you find a good configuration, like you can reprint this file over and over and over. Really be careful and be cautious about how you are going to apply these supports. Some small regions like these, sometimes you don't need to do it, like this one, because it's very small. Your printer most likely is going to be able to execute well. Other areas you might have to pay attention to. All right, the nose, we also need it inside the nose as well. And now let's paint the second one, which is this one. And for this little guy, I'm also going to paint the supports, but it's much easier because I can use the fill bucket right here, right? And now I know that this entire area has been painted. This one is smaller, perhaps I can leave it without it. Also in here, I do need a little bit. And again, I can still do the highlight overhang in this case. You see, already pointed out to a place that I haven't seen, which is this one, that might be interesting for me to apply as well. Now I don't want to paint the entire thing. Let me reduce the angle. There you go. In here also. So these are areas where I want the supports to be applied. And in this model, we also have a little bit of a trick, because if I added supports in here, which the automatic supports would generate, this support would kill the entire purpose of this model, which is to be an articulated model that becomes a controller and then it becomes a robot. So if I add the supports in here, I'm going to be destroying the functionality of the model. So this is why it's important sometimes for you to make your supports manually rather than automatically. Now for the last case, we could add the automatic supports. And how would that work? I would go on the Going Bananas like this, support, and then I could enable here, instead of 3 manual, which is the one that I would be using in the mask, for example, I would use the normal automatic, which is going to generate the support when I have degrees under 30 degrees. I can do 35 degrees in here, and then it would automatically generate the supports in that specific section. So now let's slice it, and there you go. You have the supports. I've only selected this one, but you have supports in here in regions that I wouldn't put supports in. I wouldn't put supports inside in here, especially because this is the extension of our controller that we need to click it in order to really work. When I have the supports inside, it's not going to be useful anymore. I mean, it could be useful, you could be able to remove those supports, but it's going to be a pain, and an avoidable pain. So this is why we're going to tackle the supports for this model slightly different. So now going back, let's go back to the prepare. I'm still going to paint the supports for this model. So what I'm going to do is the overhang is at 35, and then I'm going to grab the circle again, Let me make it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to paint this inner region right here, which is the region that I want my supports to be applied. Done for this one, going to do the same for the other one. Show the highlight, it's 35, and then paint the inner section of this model. All right, now I'm gonna go back. Let me select the models, and I'm gonna go on support. I'm going to enable the supports. Instead of normal automatic, I can do normal manual, and then slicing again. What we have in here is the supports only in the regions that I feel are most suitable and the regions that I wish to have these supports. Okay, so most likely what you are going to find in your daily life is things like this. These are the things that we like to print in 3D printing, organic models, very complex models. So I think there's a big possibility that the majority of you guys watching this video are going to find these cases in your 3D printing activity on your daily lives, all right? But then that goes to a second question. There are more than one type of supports, like I showed you. There's a normal, there's a tree. Now I'm gonna teach you how to use each one of these types of support. All right, so for this type of model like this one, the one that I think is the most suitable one is the tree manual, right? So we have painted, we have done the entire work, and I'm going to explain you a little bit why it's called tree, but I'm gonna use the tree manual, and this is going to generate a more organic and easier to avoid type of support. So now let me slice and show to you what happens. Okay, so now as you can see, we have the trees coming off the build plate all the way into our mask. I'm gonna change the here to line type so we can visualize what's support and what's part of our model. And now let's go back to the islands that I've mentioned before and see how these are being much better protected now. All right, we have the trees coming up, and then eventually these are going to touch the little island, support it until it goes all the way up and joins the model safely and successfully. All right, and the reason why this is the best support for this type of model, it's because it avoids touching the surface of the model entirely until it reaches the tipping point, but just the tipping point where it needs to apply the support. So this one is a more effective and easier support to remove, and then it's able to maintain the quality, especially for organic shapes, kind of like what we have in here. Alternatively, if we move this to normal manual and then slice it again, this is the type of support you would end up with. And this support is really, really, really painful to remove. Could you imagine a support that starts from the model and it ends inside the model? Could you imagine the difficulty to remove all of these supports? It's incredibly more difficult. And for a long time in 3D printing, these were the only supports that existed. So this is why we've kind of learned how to avoid supports at all costs, especially us 3D designers that work with 3D printing. We kind of learn how to avoid supports at all costs. But now we have the three, especially the tree manual that you are able to kind of highlight and paint where you want the supports to be applied, are a much better solution, and it makes it a lot easier for us to print these types of files that used to be very complex a few years ago. And now I'm gonna give you a bonus tip of something that you might have not realized it yet, but let me show you the generated model here, the G code, right? When you scroll down in here, you will see that the tip of that little tooth right here, where is it? There you go. That little tip right here that you're barely seeing, it's not touching the model as well. It's also generating, where is it? It's also generating an island. There you go. It's also generating an island right here. So there is something that you can do, especially like this is a model that it was designed to be printed on a resin printer. So what do you do in these cases? You're going to right click and I'm going to add a sphere. All right, so now I have my sphere right here. Let me just hit OK. And I'm going to scale that down dramatically until it's very small, perhaps even smaller than this. Let me get the generic sphere right here. There you go. And then I'm going to move this to the position where I have that floating teeth. All right, so there you go. Let me move towards where it is, which is that little point right there. It's kind of tricky to adjust the right position. We're very close now. Where is it? There it is. And we have the tip over there. Let me move the sphere to the side. Now I'm going to adjust it with this axis. There you go. Alright, so now we have it. That's barely noticeable. You did not change at all the aesthetic of the teeth. And the only thing that you would have to do now is to just get this little sphere and put it to the other side. And let me know in the comments below if you have done things like that in your prints, if you have found ways to kind of hack your slicer to achieve a good result. But by doing these techniques that I just showed you, you are able to print complex print like this one that is meant to be printed on a resin printer on your FDM printer, and it's going to be a cool and successful print. And by the way, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel to see more contents like this. Let me slice it up. And now as you can see, we have our tooth fully supported, and it's not an island anymore, so it's much safer to be printed. Most likely this is not gonna give me a fail, and it's a simple fix that you can do directly on your slicer. It does take some observation and also some time to make it well, but as you can see, this is unnoticeable if you did not know it was there, and it's still a way to fix and print this file. But then in situations where we have a big flat surface, I still prefer to use the regular supports, because in my opinion it gives a much better surface for you to put your solid layer on top. So it's much better to have one solid layer than multiple little trees that sometimes some of the branches might fall. It's a trickier print to do. So this is a more stable way to make your filaments, and if you have a flat surface, there's no reason for you to use the tree supports in that case. And let me show you what happens when we use the tree manual in this case. As you can see, we have like a bunch of little trees being designed, being built under our model. I don't think it makes a lot of sense, especially when we look at how this is going to be structured on top. This is most likely going to be a successful print. There's no reason why I think this would fail, but still, I think it's more stable, and for me, it makes more sense to be a flat, stable surface underneath it. So this is why in these cases, I still prefer to use the normal manual support. The only situation where I would use the tree support in this case is if my support had to avoid a part that was underneath it. So if it had to go around the model to then support the region, even if it was a flat region, I would prefer to use the tree supports, because I think the avoiding makes sense for us to use the tree support rather than the normal support, which is the one that I picked here. And now on to the third situation that we have in here. I'm gonna show you, when we look here at the support settings, let me go here and pick the two going bananas. It feels like we only have two types of support, and that's not entirely true. So we have the normal manual, which is the one that we picked, but we also have in here the style, and then you have the default, the grid, and the snug. And when we use the snug version, you see that it only puts material in the exact position where we need it to have. So if I compare here to the regular, to the default, which is the standard one, you will see that we have some excess materials around that. And then the snug, it's a little bit optimized. It only makes the pillars right where you need the pillars to exist. So this is a little bit of a more streamlined way to make the regular supports in here. All right, so now that we covered the styles, when to use one type of support, when to use the other type of support, let's go to a very crucial question. What is the ideal setting in order to have that easy and satisfying to remove support? Let's answer that question right now. And for that, I'm going to cover 3 that are the most crucial support settings that you need to learn. And the first one is the top Z distance. So it's the distance that we have between our support and the model that we're actually building. So when we do, let me change here the style, let me go line type again. When we do the supports, there will be a moment where we are going to be touching the supports with the model that we are printing. So there is a little bit of a distance over there. And what I recommend you to do is to use 1 layer height. So if you're using 0.2 as a layer height, use 0.2 on your top Z distance. So in this case, we are using 0.2. Let's go to support, and then we're gonna go on top Z distance, and we're going to put 0.2 as well. But here there's something that you should keep in mind. Don't do that, because if you do that, the support is not going to do its function properly. So if you're printing at 0.16, no worries, you can use 0.16. And if you're printing at 0.28, then that's a trick. don't go over 0.2. So keep the 0.2 all the way to 0.2. You can still scale to be 1 layer height. Over 0.2, keep it in the 0.2. That's the ideal. So now let's go to the second tip, which is the interface. So when we do the supports, let me slice to show you, there is one thing that happens between the layer, there it is, between our support, the structure of our support, and the model that we are printing, which is called the support interface. So what do you do with this specific setting? And in here we have top interference layers. I usually keep 3 layers in the top interface because I feel it makes a better mesh and an overall quality for that model slightly better. So I think 3 is good, and the interface is also what's going to be good for you to remove those supports. So super important, 3 top interface layers. And now let's go to the third and last tip. And this is a crucial tip for you to have a good surface quality under your supports, which is super relevant. And that setting is the top interface spacing, that by default is 0.5, but you can do 0. And I'm going to slice and show to you what happens. That spacing is really a spacing that it lives on your interface, but the more spacing you have, since you are printing on top of that, allows for more deformation of that initial layer, causing it to be a little bit more stuck and with less surface quality. So this is super important for you to keep 0. Let's go to the other model, our controller in here, because it's very noticeable how this is going to give you a better result. Okay, so when we look at this, now look how well this is. We have a very fine layer that is happening between the last support layer and our first bridge layer that we have here, right? So, but if you look, since we have the 0.2 spacing between the top interface and the bridge, you see that it creates 1 layer, then it has a blank layer, and then you have the bridge. This is the top Z distance, and then we have our bridge layer that is going to be perfectly laid on top of our supports. Just to give you a comparison, let's see what happens when we go back here to the 0.5 interface spacing. So what happens right here is that when we have that layer, that last layer, let me push down here, we have the filament being deposited on top of that very weird shaped layer, right? And when you look underneath this, remember that this is going to be the first layer that you will be looking at, and it's going to have that very rough, very weirdly finished surface. So when you go here and you change the spacing to 0, where is it? And you slice it again, now you have a much better finish on that layer. And if you want to learn more about 3D printing, as you can see here, there are a lot of settings and a lot of cool things that you can tweak, change, and optimize on your prints. We have the links to STL Academy in the description of this video, where you will find a course on 3D printing, but also a course on entrepreneurship, 3D modeling, a lot of different skills that are very, very cool for us makers to have if you want to print for profit or to just print better. And now for the last tip in this video, how do you properly remove your support? And the correct answer to that is using tools. Don't do what I did in the beginning of this video. When you use a tool, you are much more precise on removing the filament and you avoid getting hurt, because PLA can also get a little sharp and you can't cut your fingers removing the support. So really take your time, get your tools, remove the supports bit by bit. Supports, they are meant to be broken. So if you need to break your support to access the areas where you need to remove them, do that carefully, do that slowly, until that eventually you're going to remove the entire thing. There's always that anxiety of removing the supports, which I have felt multiple times, but really the best thing that you can do is to take it slow. Don't break the model that you just printed, and remove it safely, slowly, and have your perfect print in your hand. And now when you have situations like this one, which is very crucial, and you have very fragile models like this one that has a glass is super tiny, super fragile, what I recommend you to do is take your time as well. Sometimes you cut the branches first, but be very careful when you remove the base in order to break parts of your model. So really try to break by parts, remove it by parts as well. Don't try to remove the entire thing all at once, because there is a big chance for you to break your model. So these were the tips that I had on supports. These are questions that we get a lot here at STLFLIX. Hope I was able to answer most of the questions that we have. And also, if you have other questions, feedbacks, opinions, please leave in the comment below. Maybe your tip can be a golden tip for us and for the other people watching this video. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.